Check, 1, 2. I do like getting really close to Mike, so yeah, you don't have to give me as much input gain. Got the mic etiquette. Check, check, check. All right, folks. I know some people are going to be trickling in as I get started, so I'll make sure I give a little extra time for people to find the spots. And we'll get started. Should I test the clicker? Oh, ho, ho. Point it that way? Okay. Is everybody having fun at the conference so far? Yeah, okay. Getting some good knowledge. There's a lot of people here, not specifically in this room yet, but yeah, there are definitely a lot of people here. Oh, that's true. All right, well, I think we can at least get started now. You know, people trickle in, that's cool. Hello, everyone, and Hauka, as the Kumeyaay say, my friends and neighbors down in San Diego. I'm Tom Hamilton. I'm the founder and president of Lumbercycle, which is a nonprofit sustainability forestry company. So we work primarily in doing all things circular economy and circular lives of trees, from the seed all the way through the planting, through the maintenance of trees, and then what to inevitably do with those trees at the end of their life cycle. And today we're going to be talking about managing and utilizing woody biomass waste in tribal forestry projects. Path to resilience and community enrichment. So the things that we're going to cover, and go ahead and send it to the next slide, just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to be doing. I have no problem talking for extremely long periods of time. My limiting factor is how quickly my voice will blow out. So what I want to try and do is make as nice and brief and succinct of a presentation as I can, and then open things up for questions and conversations, because you know, I'm hoping that I can share a lot of my knowledge and experience in working in forestry and woody biomass utilization. But wisdom, of course, is a collaboration, and every single person has got their own unique scenario for their land and for their community. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of sort of how biomass utilization works in your forest management plans. But then, you know, we can take that information and be able to customize it for whichever kind of situation you're working with at home. So we're going to talk about what is woody biomass, where you start, available technologies, and community enrichment. And I really also want to focus on what sort of grant funding is available for it, what our experience has been working with tribal communities and beyond down in San Diego, and then we can start talking about the rest of it. So if you'd send it to the next slide, I just want to talk about identifying woody biomass in your forest. How many people are here from California? Californians? Where's my non-Californians? Yeah, where from? Arizona and Arizona too. Okay, cool. Well, I can probably assume that you have trees in your community, and you know, trees get very large, and someday those things have to come down, whether it's because you need to do fuels and fire risk management for your community, or maybe it's a dead or diseased or dying tree, or maybe you're putting in new infrastructure. big, massive, large trees very often need to come down, and you have to find something to do with it. In my experience, we've worked in both the urban environments and in our natural forest lands, and those both cover two different zones of more or less the same thing. And one of my jobs is trying to build the connections between the things that we've learned to be more impactful in our urban environments and the things that we've done to be more impactful in our native forest lands, and be able to put those things together so that you can find an optimal solution using knowledge from both of those sectors. So when you're in an urban environment, what is it, what we call biomass utilization in an urban field is landfill diversion, right? We're planting trees that come from God knows where all over the world in people's front and backyards, and they cut them down for whatever reason and get shipped off to the landfill. So how can we find ways in which we can utilize that wood so that it's not filling up landfills and polluting the environment with carbon dioxide or methane gas, whether it's decomposing aerobically or anaerobically, but also like how you can use that wood to engage the community from which those trees came from. And so moving into the forestry sector, we can do a very similar kind of program where people who engage and are active and participate in forestry programs, or just are people who live and enjoy and use the forest, or are stewards for the forest, we can find ways in which we can use the opportunities for doing fuels management and biomass reduction in those communities, and be able to use them as a tool for enriching the communities that they come from. So one of the major things that I'm working on in these programs is not just finding out what to do with wood that comes down in a forest, but how you can use that as a tool to continue building connections and links between the community and the forests that are stewarded by that community. So that's the kinds of things that we're going to be trying to touch upon using available technologies today to process that wood, but then go a step further and find out how can we use this wood to serve the community, and how can we reduce waste. And so that's what we're going to be aiming for. Now, we have had supermassive, high-intensity wildfires. And when I think anybody thinks about trying to manage a forest's health, that's sort of the number one concern. How can we protect our community and protect our forests from having these overwhelmingly large, high-intensity wildfires, especially in California? So, being able to, especially because of fire suppression that's been happening for now many, many decades, we've got these massively overgrown forests and undermanaged forests because, even if tribes wanted to participate in doing cultural burnings or, using good fire in their communities, there's so many barriers, functionally from the state and from the federal government that don't allow you to continue practicing that, although it seems to be changing, which is definitely a good thing. But we still have to deal with the undermanaged forests that we're left to steward. And so that can involve, the massive tree snags from previous fires, dead or diseased or dying trees from invasive pests or drought, extensive undergrowth that prevents the growth of new trees. Ceanothus is one of the big ones down in San Diego and Southern California where we're at, which kind of helps, they grow super, super fast, which makes it really hard for new trees to grow up behind it to then repopulate that forest. Invasive species, especially on private properties, high density forests where things haven't been managed, so you have a greater density, which leads to a much larger opportunity for things to grow, to be on fire with high intensity. And then we've got timber logs. All right, take us on to the next slide, please. Now, there's a big difference between timber harvesting and what we work in, which is hazardous fuels reductions. And that really greatly depends on what your environment is like. If you're in the Sierras or in, the San Bernardino Mountains or up in Humboldt County in Northern California, there's already been these long-standing industries that surround doing timber harvesting and infrastructure that goes around that. You have a large forest, you have contractors that come in, licensed timber operators that fell the trees, they produce tons of lumber, and then they sell it. It's an industry. That is not the industry that I'm involved in, okay? What we're working in is not timber harvesting and production, and it's more of how do you deal with stuff that has to come down. So it's really good to distinguish the difference between those things if you're thinking about including biomass utilization in your forest management plans. Some communities might benefit from having timber harvesting and production if they have really massive forests of desirable tree species that could bring value and revenue and income for your tribal communities by being able to grant access to those trees while still being stewards of it. But alternatively, and I'll give myself as an example, down in Southern California, we are not a timber community. You know, we have mostly coast live oak. We have a lot of tier 2 or class B species of conifers like culture pine, a little tiny bit of Jeffrey pine, but none of the ponderosas or sugar pines that you'd see in typical commercial logging. So, you know, if you have a forest that doesn't have commercially viable tree species, then what do you do if you have to cut down all those trees and you don't have a massive logging company to come in and provide value for those trees? Well, that falls on us, the community, to be able to find creative solutions for what to do with those logs. And so that's what we're trying to do. So the big difference here is, you know, with timber harvesting and timber production on a massive scale, it has a very large amount of federal and state oversight to manage those. You know, you'll have to speak with licensed technical operators, and you'll have to have a timber harvesting plan. And there was recently a memorandum put out by CAL FIRE for what sort of documentation would be required if you were going to be doing timber harvesting programs in your community. And it's a lot. But if you have the right you know, program managers that can handle that, it can still be lucrative for you if you have timber species on your property. But what I've found, especially in Southern California, and it'll be different for everybody, is that when you're working with those low-grade species that are not typically commercially viable, we still have to find the solutions. And so what we're going to talk about today are some of those technologies that we use. We typically do most of our work with a sawmill producing lumber, and we use that lumber in community enrichment programs. We have some specific projects that we'll talk about where we've seen some success in harvesting those timbers instead of letting them go to burn piles or shipped off to wherever else. You know, we had the memorandum from CAL FIRE that was stating all of the legal requirements and documentation requirements for doing timber harvesting. And then there was supplemental information about general sawmill use and being able to incorporate that in your grant programs so that you can do biomass utilization for your trees otherwise. And they mentioned that, like, as long they're willing to give funding for those kinds of programs so long as they're not some kind of direct competition to doing commercial logging and stuff like that. So, you know, that's another really, really careful distinction. You know, if you're looking at biomass utilization for timbers on your land, you want to make sure that you're steering, unless you have that specific land that has all of those timbers, you're going to be moving more in this direction, which is reducing waste from already active hazardous fuel reduction programs that come with your forest management plan. So yeah, they had some really great, like, little insights on things that you could make and what sort of portable sawmills to use, and it was really, really nice. Let's move on to the next slide. So Lumbercycle started in 2016. We started as a sawmill in the urban environments. It was all about reducing waste from the landfills. And so I've got over 10 years of experience operating our sawmills and our kilns. And what's really nice about having a portable sawmill is that you have relatively low initial equipment costs. You definitely have lots of opportunities to engage your community, whether it's through workforce development, utilizing the wood for community, generating revenue for your other programs, and reducing your waste. And then, has anybody here ever heard of an air curtain burner? Air curtain burner? No? Okay, got one. An air curtain burner is sort of the next level. So let's take, for example, we're working in a forest that, well, one of the projects that I was working on recently that was outside of the tribal community was with a Girl Scout camp. And the Girl Scout camp, it's called Camp Wanaka in Julian, California, up in our mountains. They were going to be doing massive fuels reductions to try and be sort of a catalyst for their community to be able to do forest thinning and reduce the risk of massive wildfires. And so they were cutting down and masticating huge numbers of trees. And we were brought in and got funding through our local power company to do demonstrations and community enrichment and engagement and educational opportunities with our sawmill, cutting wood and then giving it to the community members and to the camp for them to use for stuff. But when we had logs that we could not mill, and there are definitely situations where there's wood that you just can't mill, an air curtain burner is one of the most efficient ways to eliminate as much biomass as humanly possible and as quickly as possible. Now, the downside is you don't get anything out of an air curtain burner except for ash, whereas with a sawmill, you're getting very valuable woody byproducts that can, provide economic opportunities. An air curtain burner, if you can imagine it, maybe if we go to the next slide, I'll have a picture of it. Give me one more slide. This is what an air curtain burner looks like. It's like a giant shipping container. And if you can imagine putting in a bunch of wood, setting it ablaze, and then there's a curtain, a big line array of fans that creates a giant curtain of high velocity air that then circulates through the wood and sort of like a kiln or a furnace burns the wood really, really fast. And what's a benefit about it is that same air curtain also prevents airborne particulate matter from escaping while it burns. So it takes that smoke and other particulate matter and continues to burn it until it's vaporized. And there's up to a 95% biomass reduction rate when you're using these air curtain burners. So depending on which size model you get, you could potentially, the largest model that they have for a stationary piece of equipment for an air curtain burner is between 9 and 13 tons of material per hour. The Girl Scout camp has 2 that they use, and they are able, now 9 to 13 tons, that's for like conventional pine timbers or softwood timbers. If you're dealing with your large oak trees, it can do much, it's much slower because it's a much more dense wood. But it's a very, very impressive amount. And when you combine an air curtain burner with a sawmill program, you get a couple of really unique opportunities. Number one, air curtain burners are good for all kinds of brush. So where, we can't mill ceanothus on a sawmill, so we need to find a way to get rid of it. And shipping it as far as you can away or chipping it on site cannot really be as beneficial for you because you're going to be spreading seeds, but also, which will just allow for regrowth, but having to truck things out of your environment is also a huge cost for your community and for the environment. So having one of these stationary not only helps you process your own waste, but, and the Girl Scouts is a great example of this, they then become a hub for other forestry programs within that area to be able to take their woody biomass waste to them to burn for a price. So if you have a really good model working where you can get these machines, and there are lots of grants that will fund this kind of these kinds of programs and this kind of equipment, you can not only enhance the amount of woody biomass that you can process, but being able to generate revenue as a resource for your broader community can also be really, really important and beneficial for your community. I've got an idea that I'm working on right now for a grant where you can actually get mobile versions of these. And imagine, for example, you have a massive wildfire that hits a large forest community. One of the biggest barriers to actually having regeneration in that forest or remanagement of that forest after a massive wildfire is being able to get that biomass out so that they can do, survey the landscape and then get things ready for reforesting that area. I've got a vision where, you could get those mobile ones and you can get the special exemptions for emergency situations to be able to utilize these machines, but being able to have a workforce that is trained that then mobilize immediately after a fire with those special California ARB exemptions to go into an area, have the logging company pull the material out, and then be able to get rid of it there with an air curtain burner and with the sawmill can just absolutely increase the speed for which you could reforest that area, and it can have really positive benefits. So that's one of the things we're working on. Can we go back one slide, please? I love sawmills. I love wood. I'm a mega wood nerd. And what I've learned over the last 2 years in doing partner projects with tribal communities is that there is just endless potential for ways in which this wood can be utilized in our tribal communities. Okay, so I have a couple of photos here. This is a program that we did with the Palma Band of Luiseño Indians over in San Diego County. They were able to get a grant called the Connects Grant through San Diego State University, where they were able to do some trail building on top of Palomar Mountain. And we were called in with our sawmill to mill the logs that they were taking out from their fuels reductions program. And they were dragging it straight to our sawmill, which we brought up onto the mountain. We milled it into dimensional lumber, and almost immediately, we were able to use that wood to build community structures on top of the mountain so that it could be more of a welcoming environment for the tribal community to come up and actually be there and enjoy it and have amenities so that they can enjoy themselves better. So we built 3 of these large pergolas and shade structures. We built an observation deck. We built a bunch of tables and benches, outhouses, got the thing totally fitted out. And what I loved about building on the reservation, which was a super unique experience for us, is that we didn't have to ask the county of San Diego for permission to build anything. That is really, really special, okay, guys? Having worked in, especially in urban environments for so long, there's so many limitations for what you can do on a construction basis with wood that comes from our own community. And, you know, it's all works to try and protect the timber industry that exists now, that relies on everybody to buy that wood, when in fact, you can and you should use the wood in your community for your own building projects, and you're allowed to. And that is something that you should wholeheartedly be taking advantage of, because these are, number one, natural resources that are in your community, and just letting it go to waste or having a contractor come in and chip them up or take them out is just not utilizing the fullest potential for what it can do for your community. So this was a really great example where we were able to build something. Not that, you know, I know getting permits is valuable because you want to make sure you're building stuff right. But we had licensed contractors building it anyway. We were just able to do it right away, and that was really, really helpful for that community. This is some tables and benches that we built under the ramadas for the Los Coyotes band of Cahuilla and Cupeño Indians, which is on Hot Springs Mountain on the far northeastern part of San Diego County. They just had their first tribal gathering in like 50 years. And we were called in, and we actually donated all this time to bring our sawmill and mill a bunch of wood that they use to build things under their ramadas and get themselves set up so that they could have the best tribal gathering that they could. And they had a really, really strong, successful gathering, which was a lot of fun. And yeah, so a sawmill program doesn't take a lot either. You know, we use a band sawmill. We have 2 Wood-Mizer band sawmills and 1 Lucas circular sawmill, so we can process any size tree you could ever possibly think of into any size wood that you'd want. We use a Nile kiln. It's a dehumidification kiln. You just basically get a shipping container, and you can outfit it with a dehumidification and heating unit so that you can suck the moisture out of your wood quickly and efficiently. That way you can use that wood for indoor projects without worrying about it warping or shrinking or changing shapes as it starts to dry. And then woodworking equipment, of course, is another great investment. You can get really simple stuff that doesn't take a lot of investment in order to make after products that can also provide extra value to the community, not just in learning how to use those and create things, but also generating revenue by selling those projects to bring in more revenue for your environmental program. Let's go forward 2 slides, please. There's plenty of other opportunities besides sawmills and air curtain burners for producing value and revenue in your forest management projects. Getting a really solid firewood splitter is really great. There's plenty of, if you have lots of hardwoods, like really massive, large oaks that wouldn't otherwise be able to be easily processed by a sawmill, there's some really great tools out there that you can attach to your skid steers or excavators. They're called conical cone splitters. You can take them, a massive log bigger than any of us could ever be, and be able to just drive it into the log and split it. And that's how, if you have cedar logs, you can split it into split rail fencing, which is a really high value product that is really easy to utilize, especially in rural communities. And then also we found that there is actually a lot of value in whole logs to be used in playgrounds and nature play exhibits. So we've been working with schools, preschools, and community parks, and all kinds of private properties where you can reutilize logs in all sorts of ways to enrich youth communities by giving them fun, natural things to play on. We work with a range of different designers that do that, and we're able to customize that. There's also the production of biochar. Anybody know about biochar? Yeah, well, I'd hope so, because biochar is a really great supplement for improving your soil health. If you can take woody biomass and use the process of pyrolysis, which is indirectly burning or cooking the wood so that you can get all of the impurities out and leave virtually just activated carbon in there, that can create a really healthy environment for other microbes to develop and grow and improve your soil's health. So especially if you have a post-burn landscape and you're trying to, revitalize the soils in there, it's not necessarily good to just take biochar and sort of chuck it onto the ground and just hope for the best, but mixing it as a supplement with whatever soil solutions you're working on, whether it's mulch or chips or things like that, can help allow for microbes to grow to improve that soil health. So biochar can be processed in a lot of different ways. There's really simple batch containers you can use to do this, or full-on production methods. And we have a biochar reactor, which has given us a lot of hell over the years, but there are ways in which you can produce it in a commercial way that can serve your community or be able to sell it beyond. Next slide. So where do you start? Does everybody have a forest management plan for their forest? Yeah? Does anybody not have a forest management plan for their forest? That's an even better question. I would hope at an EPA conference that everybody's pretty active in that. Forest management plans are the first step. It's what you need to have in order to apply for grants, in order to do treatment zones in your forests. You gotta have it. There's definitely communities out there that don't have forest management plans. We're working with one right now, and being able to recognize those first steps and be able to get collaborative opportunities with those communities is really important. And for us, the number one resource for developing, maintaining, or augmenting your forest management plans are working with our Resource Conservation District. We have a really active one in San Diego County, the Resource Conservation District of Greater San Diego County. And they're a great source for funding, for grants. It's just great to be in communication with them, not only because it can be helpful for your own program, but they can often aggregate programs from all around your county to get larger grants, and they will also do all of the NEPA and CEQA requirements for it. So if you weren't aware of that, working with your RCD can be a really beneficial tool for you, because they handle a lot of the busy work that comes with managing the paperwork for your projects, but they're also a great resource for finding funding and then finding collaborative opportunities that can benefit everybody. And then once you develop the forest management plan, you apply for grants, and then we can start to reclaim your cultural and ecological stewardship of your forests. When it comes to funding, I have a few sources that I've worked with to find successful pieces of funding. Obviously, the big ones are the BIA and with CAL FIRE and with the U.S. Forest Service. But some of the ones that people aren't as familiar with are working with the California Department of Conservation, which has a large number of grants available. The NRCS, of course, is a big one, which is a federal agency. There's through the RCD and through universities, of course, San Diego State down in San Diego offers a lot. If you're not involved in your local fire safe council, obviously that is a really, really helpful place. Those are often run by resource conservation districts as well, which can help bring that aggregation and bring collaborative partnerships to bring in larger amounts of funding. And then conservancies like the Sierra Nevada Conservancy And then also one of the ones that I really like to plug with folks, especially in the EPA departments of our tribes, is getting involved with something called the Reforestation Partnership Pipeline. This is hosted with American Forests, and it's a great place where there has to be more tribal representation, where you bring in all of those grant makers for forestry projects and then create small huddles where you can get like-minded groups that need similar projects done, and then all together with those grant makers, with those state and federal agencies, and with local community organizers, you can then get your projects done and funded. So you can find that by looking up the Reforestation Partnership Pipeline. Question? Yeah, the Reforestation Partnership Pipeline, the RPP, hosted by American Forests. You can join that newsletter, and they have meetings a couple times a year. It's been a really, really positive experience for me. And with the people that I partner with to be involved in that, you know, the resources are there. It gives you face time with state agency representatives that might otherwise be really difficult to get a hold of. So, yeah, the Reforestation Partnership Pipeline, definitely a beneficial thing. All right, let's go to the next slide. I'm going to get through these last ones. One more slide, please. Let's talk about the projects that we've been working on, just to give you an idea of what's possible, and then I'd love to open things up for discussion and questions, okay? So one of my most exciting recently funded projects is with our friends over at the La Jolla Band of Lusenia Indians, and I've got my dear pal Henry in the back. Come on, Henry, give us a hand. Yeah, so yeah, Henry rules. One of the things that's really, really pushing the boundaries in terms of doing woody biomass utilization in the San Diego community is this grant that we've gotten in partnership with Lumbercycle and the La Jolla Band of Lusenia Indians with a Forest Service Wood Products Infrastructure Assistance Program. That is due to, if they haven't announced it, they should be announcing it any minute now. It's a Forest Service grant that has special funding for tribal communities through this one. It's called the WPIA, Wood Products Infrastructure Assistance Program, and they usually accept proposals through December, and so that'll be happening again this year. And just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to be accomplishing in that program is they already have active fuels reductions programs going on. They're removing a lot of coast live oaks that are being killed by the gold-spotted oak borer beetle, which is ravishing all of Southern California and probably will be making their way to a forest near you before too long. And this program is giving them an entire shop of woodworking tools, a brand new sawmill, a brand new kiln, and then Lumbercycle will be coming on site to give a 6-month training course for 6 of their environmental program workers to teach them how to use the sawmill and the kilns and develop a wood products program so that they can market the materials that they're producing from that oak that they're going to be cutting down anyway, to bring in revenue for their programs. So it's an all-encompassing program that is supplemental to existing forest management and forest health programs that they're working on that will allow them to do workforce development for their crew, teaching them valuable skills for operating a sawmill, a kiln, and woodworking equipment, while also being able to generate that precious revenue to keep things going without grants. So that is a really, really special program that I'm really excited to get started with them in the next year. And then the last one we did, which I mentioned before, was with the Palma tribe, and that was through the collaborative of Native Nations for Clients, Transformation, and Stewardship, the Connects grants. I mentioned that, which was really well. I'm repping, actually, my shirt today is from the Los Coyotes gathering that they had for the work that we did with them. We're also going to be working with them on a future grant, which will be milling the wood that comes from their forest as part of their economic development team to improve their campgrounds by building cabins and other structures that they can use to promote ecotourism for the Los Coyotes tribe. And so that's going to be a really big and important grant that's going to be coming, or project that we're working on. And then we've been working recently with the Mesa Grande Band of Digueño Mission Indians, and we're working with them to develop that forest management plan and then be able to implement it with their GSOB infested forests. Any other slides? Let's go one more. There's my contact information. You know, I am always available to talk. All right. We have active programs now. I'm looking for collaborative projects anywhere in our region. If you have questions about how you can work on this in a future project, I'm available to just answer questions. I can help you. I can come to you. You can come to me. Whatever you need, I, as a nonprofit, are here as a community resource to help just get the connections made so that you can get that wisdom for your own community and develop it and maintain it and keep that sovereignty and that agency within your communities. And I'm all about it, and I'm here to support it. And that is generally what we're working with. Okay, so that is it in a nutshell. Without diving into too crazy technical details about operating a sawmill, but I would love to take this opportunity now to invite anyone to ask any burning questions or talk about the forest experience on their land. And, you know, if you have any ideas or things like that. So what questions do we have? Surely you didn't sit through that entire 35 minutes and not have a question come through your head. Yeah, question. What are we doing with the biochar? So we work with community gardens. You know, it's typically on a smaller scale. In urban environments, we work with mulch yards. We produce the biochar. We mix it with their as a soil amendment to their existing mulch piles, and then they disperse it to their gardens. And so, yeah, it works really well for us on a small scale. There's still a lot of research being done, and that needs to be done on the effectiveness of biochar. But yeah, it's definitely a growing industry, and there's some pretty easy ways to be able to generate it. Yeah. Do we use small diameter poles for our building material? Yes. So at the Los Coyotes gathering, and for most tribes in Southern California, they build ramadas for the gathering. And so as part of the tradition, they gather the cedar logs from the mountains, and then we'll use small diameter cedar logs as posts to build the ramadas. And that's one really great way to do it. I do have some other photos in which we've utilized small diameter logs in other building projects, especially with playground and nature play programs. We've built, you know, small structures, shade structures, benches. We absolutely have ways in which we can utilize small diameter logs. They're not quite as valuable on the lumber production side, but as whole logs, there's a lot of opportunities in which you can incorporate them into building projects. Yeah, but you just have to be really, really careful, because mounting them, you know, being able to mount them properly in a way that can preserve them for long periods of time can be a challenge as a whole log. You know, when you're working with dimensional materials or you've got a slab of cement, you can typically anchor them somewhere where they're out of the soil, and that will allow them to last a lot longer. Whereas if you take a small diameter pole, which is young growth trees with very large rings, you put them into the ground, they're going to decompose really quickly. So, you know, even with the cedar logs that they'd used for the ramadas at the Los Coyotes Reservation, I would probably put a timeline of 8 to 10 years on those before they would need to be replaced. So you sort of have to find a balance with that, but there are ways to do it. It can just be a little more challenging, still totally doable if that's the resource that you have, you know. And so that comes also to the creative solutions side. You know, you work with what you got, you find those creative solutions. There's definitely ways, and I can show you from our experience in which you can utilize small diameter logs. Yeah. Question?
I've been wondering a lot about, we used to have a lot of biomass electrical production, energy production.
Yeah.
Is that anything that can be done on a smaller scale? Or is that completely out?
So the question is about using biomass to generate power, right? And electricity. Yeah. So what's interesting, it takes a lot of infrastructure investment, but it is possible with air curtain burners, actually. They have models of air curtain burners where you can use the air curtain burners to burn the biomass and generate electricity. They tried doing that at the Girl Scout camp but it ended up being a much larger investment for the power company, which is SDG&E down in San Diego, than they wanted to give in order to get that program going. So yeah, it's in the magnitude of millions of dollars to get the infrastructure set up and tie it into the grid. But it is possible, and there are communities, especially on the West Coast and in the South, or on the East Coast and in the South, that utilize those air curtain burners to generate power. And that's something that definitely needs to be looked into, especially where there's mass amounts of woody biomass. In Southern California, we had a bio plant down in the desert that's closed down, and so now people, the nearest one to us in San Diego County, I think, is in the Coachella Valley, and so it's extremely cost prohibitive to be able to chip all that material and then ship it that far just to generate power somewhere else. So yeah, being able to develop that infrastructure is definitely worth looking into. And I know that there's some feasibility studies that you can get funded through BIA grants to find out whether that kind of power generation is good for your area. But yeah, it is possible, but it is a challenge. In fact, using the air curtain burner in general is a challenge. It was not existent except for a few that were owned by the Forest Service and CAL FIRE, that they were able to utilize during the 2003 cedar fires down in Southern California. But generally speaking, it's not known enough within the California Air Resources Board, and there were massive multi-year long hurdles in order to get a permit to even turn it on. But the Girl Scouts and Kent Drake, who is the land manager for that camp, has finally gotten the permits. They have opened the doors with the Air Resources Board, and it will allow for opportunities to be able to utilize that on a private scale in the future for California. So even though it has been a massive challenge up to this point, very, very optimistic for the future using air curtain burners in California because of the research and development that they've done at the Girl Scout camp. Yeah. And he's available as a consultant if anybody wants to get information specifically about how to run them and how to get the appropriate permits. Question?
Yeah, when you were first talking about this, you said, what was the name of the grant?
That they got for the air curtain burners? I don't know if I mentioned that. So they got it as a mix of multiple different funding sources that came from the RCD, which was funneled through CAL FIRE. They did get match funding from NRCS, and they were trying to get funding from the power company SDG&E. Yeah, to get those.
So does a tribe have to have a permit to turn theirs on if they don't?
That's a really, really good question. And I don't know the answer to it, but it's worth looking. It's definitely worth looking into. And, because then I think you would have to worry about federal regulations, which Lord knows they probably have them. But yeah, there are definitely a large investment of safety protocols. I mean, you have to have a biomass-free zone for like 100 square yards or something. I think they have a 2-acre site where they have their 2 bio burners. But yeah, I think once you get past that, yeah, what the regulation looks like on the tribal side, I'm not sure yet, but I am more than willing to put in effort and time to help you find those answers. And, because I think that's a big thing in the future for tribal communities, especially if it could be used as a resource for economic and workforce development, and something that could be funded for, bringing air curtain burners with a trained tribal team to burn sites after massive wildfires. Question?
We have 2 questions online.
Oh, great.
The first one is, did the air curtain burner have a mobile option?
Yes. So they have one that's on skids that you can move with with the box truck. Gosh, the waste management. What are those ones? Yeah, they're on skids so that you can pull it with a hook truck. But they have much smaller capacity. So, and I think I had it on an earlier slide, those might be able to do, if you get the larger skid version, it can do 3 to 5 tons per hour, as opposed to the largest stationary, which is, maybe a third bigger, can do up to 9 tons in an hour.
All right, second question is, does Lumbercycle offer trainings throughout California, and does that include training for air curtain burners, example, Humboldt, Northern California?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. When it comes to the air curtain burner, you know, we work with our partner from the Girl Scouts, Kent Drake, who's available as a consultant for doing training and getting things set up and doing permits for the air curtain burners. And then we already have a pretty substantial amount of training background for doing sawmill and wood products development, including the one that we're going to be doing within the next year with the La Jolla tribe. So yeah, absolutely. And we also work with tribal-run businesses to produce workforce training videos, specifically with Condor Visual Media, which is Andrew Pittman, who is a member of the Los Coyotes tribe, and he is an incredible producer of videos. Yeah. And so we work together on producing training videos. So it's not just getting in-person training where I would come and train your crew and get your system set up, but we can also work with your crew and with the video production team to then create training videos so that after I'm gone, you know, you can continue to train your workforce as new people come in. Yeah, that's one of the programs that we offer. They're typically funded by grants. Yeah. How are we doing on time? We got 5 minutes. I did it. I did it under the time. Okay. Question in the back.
Do you have any interest in using invasive species for biomass, salt cedar? There's a big salt cedar problem over at home in Arizona, so just wondering.
Absolutely. In fact, I've done it. So our closest salt cedar orchards are in the Ansberego desert. And it was one of our first projects when we founded back in 2016. We got permission from the farmers down there, bought our sawmills, winched the trees that they'd pushed over because they were soaking up all the groundwater, and we pulled them out of the sand and milled them right there on the side of the road and brought the lumber back. And we've made all kinds of tables and benches and really cool projects using the salt cedar. It's got really beautiful grain. It's pretty blonde. There's not a lot of change in colors or anything like that, but salt cedar is a great wood to work with. Yeah, it's super, super wet when it's alive, so drying can be difficult, and you can get a lot of checks and cracks and twisting. But, you know, if you can get the right, it's all about, you know, how you dry the wood and being able to use a dehumidification kiln or a vacuum kiln in order to create an environment where you can more slowly dry it, and that'll leave you with much more stable lumber product afterwards. So, yeah, I can share information on that, too, if you're interested. Anything else, guys? Has anybody ever seen a sawmill in operation? Yeah? So, yeah, there's a big difference between the big sawmills where you see massive production for construction grade lumber, but using a portable sawmill like our wood misers is really quick and efficient. You can bring it on site, set it up within 20 minutes, and then start cutting logs right away. And we've been able to use ours for tons of community enrichment and educational opportunities, including the last 2 Earth Days for the Viejas reservation. We came onto the reservation, we did a demonstration for the kids and for the community members at Viejas, and then all the wood that we cut, which came from logs that were from the reservation, we gave away for free to all of the community members that showed up. So they were able to take the wood home and be able to make stuff for themselves using the wood that came from their community. So yeah, there's so many opportunities. We've made hundreds and hundreds of planter boxes, you know, for community gardens and for schools. We're going to be making a stand of garden boxes for the Rincon tribe in San Diego, and that's going to be another upcoming project that we're working on. We've done, you know, we've gone to schools, we've gone to conservancies. You know, there's so many opportunities where you can use it for education and enrichment and give people hands-on opportunities. I mean, even at the Girl Scout camp where we would do weekly demonstrations for their campers, little kids would come up and I'd show them exactly how to do it, and they'd cut a board, and then that board would get used to make benches and things for the camp. So like there's endless opportunities besides just utilizing it for the sake of reducing waste in your forests. You know, being able to take it to the next level to build the connections with the community members is really what I thrive with and what I enjoy. And I'd love to help anybody who would be interested in incorporating that into their community and forest management plans. And that's it. Cool. Thank you, everybody. Unfortunately, I've got to fly home to San Diego tonight, but please do not hesitate to reach out if you want to stay connected or have any other questions. Thank you.